everybody, I'm Elizabeth Hines from OurPaleoFamily.com, and I have a new and really tasty recipe for you tonight. This is chicken with a cranberry mustard sauce, and it's actually one of those recipes from the back of the package in this case it was craisins, the sweetened dried cranberries. And I made a recipe last week that was kind of an old family recipe, and it just got me looking through that cookbook that my mom made me for a wedding present. And I thought, what other great recipes are in here that my family used to love eating that we don't eat anymore because of our needing to eat in this paleo way. And I found this one, and it was one actually that my mother-in-law made for us, and I loved it, and she shared it with me. So it's not a complicated recipe, but the reason I'm showing it to you is because I wanted to be able to kind of share with you the process that I go through in taking a recipe that's full of things that we can't eat and turning it into a recipe that we can eat. So I have in this pan just some chicken broth defrosting, and this pan has nothing in it, and I need a little bit of oil. So I'm going to put in a couple tablespoons of avocado oil. That's really my favorite high heat oil because it is very mild flavor, and it just works really well. It's not dangerous to heat it or anything. So this recipe called for chicken tenders that you would dredge in flour and then fry them. And so, and then after you fry them, you take them out, you make a sauce, then you put them back in. So the frying is not to get, a crispy chicken like fried chicken. The frying is simply to, in the end, have a thick sauce. And so if I wanted to turn this into paleo, I could do the exact same thing, but coat my chicken with, instead of wheat flour, coat it with some sort of paleo approved starch like cassava flour or arrowroot is typically my favorite. But just from experience, I know that if I went to coat this is a pound of boneless, skinless chicken breast. The recipe called for chicken tenders, so I'm just cutting them into chicken tender shapes. If I were to coat this whole pound of chicken, fully in the arrowroot, I'm going to turn my heat on medium-high, and then try to brown that in the skillet, it would take a lot of oil. I would constantly be having to add oil, and I know that the end product that I want is just to have a thickened sauce. So I have just barely a tablespoon of arrowroot along with my salt and pepper, which is a half a teaspoon of each. And I've just mixed those together. That's how I'm going to get the seasoning on my chicken. And that's not going to be enough to coat all of this chicken, but it's going to be enough to either thicken my sauce totally enough, or I may add a little slurry of arrowroot at the end. But it'll be a lot easier for me to do it this way. And the reason I can't know for sure if I'm going to need it to thicken a little bit more or not is because what I'm using to make my sauce, which is almost entirely chicken broth, it varies. So sometimes I have broth that is really gelatinous, and that adds a lot of thickness and richness to whatever you then do with that broth. Excuse me. So I had a container of broth that I made in my freezer, but I don't know if that container came from one of the times I just cooked a rotisserie chicken carcass for a little while, or whether it was one where I started with a fresh chicken and added an extra wing, or maybe some feet, to get lots and lots of gelatin. I won't really know how thick my sauce is going to be until I use that broth. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So you need to just be flexible. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this chicken in. My oil is starting to shimmer a little bit, and my whole purpose here is I want to brown these a little bit, and get some of those yummy browned bits on the bottom of my pan, because that is a lot of flavor, and I want that flavor in my finished dish. So I'm just going to finish scraping up this little bit of arrowroot and salt and pepper. Remember, my goal here is not to get a crispy coating on my chicken like fried chicken, okay? But I do have all my seasoning in there, my salt and pepper, which is not to say that I couldn't add more if I needed to, but I do want to kind of get up that salt and pepper. Normally I would say don't overcrowd your pan, like if I were trying to get a crispy finish here. But again, because that's not my goal, I don't really care. I'm going to just get it all in there. I think one thing that is really good about this dish is it's sort of a sweet and savory thing, at least in my opinion. That's something I particularly love. I love the sweet and salty, sweet and savory together. And so we have the chicken with the salt and pepper, which is actually a lot of pepper. Usually, at least I do like a teaspoon of salt to a half a teaspoon of pepper. But notice I did a half a teaspoon of salt and a half a teaspoon of pepper. So that's a lot of black pepper. And then I'm going to use this stone brown mustard. And the recipe called for something called country style Dijon mustard. And there was one brand at the store that had something called country style Dijon mustard. And it wasn't necessarily a whole grain mustard, but it had sugar in it, it had cornstarch in it, and I can't remember what else. But there were a couple of different ingredients in there that I didn't want. So I found this one, which is Simple Truth Organic. This is Kroger's organic line. And it is water, organic mustard seeds, organic vinegar, salt, and spices. So there's no added sugar, no added starches or anything weird like that. So we're going to use this for our mustard. Something else the original recipe had that I'm not using is wine. It called for equal parts of broth and wine. And I don't have anything against wine, but it has something against me. I can't really consume alcohol. It's something that shows up on all of my testing as an immune trigger for me, and I know it makes me sick. So I had to figure out how to get that flavor without using the wine. So if you think about what would a white wine contribute, it's going to contribute some acidity, some sharpness, and then also probably some sweetness, depending on the particular wine you choose. So we're going to get a little sweetness from our dried cranberries. If you want a little additional sweetness, you could add a touch of honey or maple syrup or even some liquid stevia. But for that sharpness, I'm going to add lemon juice, and just about a tablespoon, which is actually a lot. But if I taste it, or you taste it when you're making this for your family, and you think, oh, I'd like a little bit more of that, then you can use more lemon juice, or you can use wine. I mean, that's fine with me. Although if you're doing something like a Whole30 or some other sort of elimination diet, you can't. And since we're pretty much living in Whole30 land over here, I am keeping in mind the no alcohol from that standpoint as well. So my chicken's going to start to brown in the middle. So I'm going to flip those over, and then I'll kind of rotate my pieces around. So I just want each piece to brown on both sides. But let me talk to you about the dried cranberries. So I told you this recipe came from the Ocean Spray Craisins company. It was on the back of their package. And so I looked at all of the dried cranberries at the grocery store, and there were several different brands. There were some that said low sugar. I thought, oh, that's perfect. So I was really trying to get some without added sugar. So the Craisin brand had something like 29 grams of added sugar per serving. So that's not the natural sweetness in the cranberries. You know, they're kind of tart. That's added sugar. So those were definitely a no-no. But the reduced sugar ones had, I think, some brands had 23, one had as low as 16 maybe grams of added sugar, and they also had cornstarch in them. So I didn't want that. So then I moved on to Whole Foods. Well, Whole Foods has those bulk bins, and they had dried cranberries in their bulk bins, but they all had sugar. Now it's cane sugar, but whatever, it's still added sugar. I don't care if it's organic. I really didn't want added sugar. But in the section of Whole Foods where they have packaged trail mixes and nuts and beef jerky, that kind of stuff in packages, they have this brand, which is Steve's Paleo Goods. So she's in California, I'm pretty sure. Oh, no, New Jersey. sorry. But they had a couple different dried fruits. I believe they had apples, blueberries, and these cranberries. And yes, they were a lot more expensive, like twice as much as the kind with sugar. But it's cranberries and some apple juice concentrate. So again, we're adding sugar with the apple juice concentrate, but I felt better about it being that instead of cane sugar. And it doesn't actually separate out added sugars versus regular sugars, but it only has 18 grams of sugar total instead of 30 something. So it's a lot less, and they taste good. Actually taste like cranberries. So as my chicken browns, it doesn't have to be completely browned all over. I'm going to take it out, and then the ones from the outside of the pan, I'll start to move in. Alright, so my broth is defrosted. I'm going to taste it. It's not the best broth I've ever made. So I just need about a cup of that. I try to not make my broth too salty when I'm making it, just so I can really control the salt in my finished dish, because I think it's hard to get your food seasoned well if you don't season it till the end. So, you know, a lot of my dishes start with cooking a bunch of vegetables, and I always salt and pepper those vegetables as they're cooking. It helps draw the water out of them, and also helps your dish really to be well seasoned in the end. And so if my broth were really as salty as I would really need it to be in the end, I hope that makes sense, it might make my finished dish too salty. I'm not sure that made sense. How pretty and brown this is. Just what we want. Okay, my chicken is looking great. We got some nice browning on all of it. You just get it out of there. I'm going to turn my heat down just a little bit because I have it almost on high. I'm going to deglaze. Get your hand out of the way of the steam. Okay, and then just set to scraping this up. Before I start adding all the other ingredients, I can still see the bottom of my pan, which I want to see, so I can get it clean. So you can do this if you're, I don't know, say you just browned something, like in your favorite cast iron skillet, and you're not making a sauce or anything, but you have all that brown stuff at the bottom. Once you take your food out that you've cooked, just put some water in it real quick and help yourself clean your pan in this way. So the whole deglazing thing isn't just for yummy eating, it's for helping you clean your pan too. Okay, so I want my heat still about medium high because I'm making my sauce. Okay, so let me reference my ingredients here. 3 tablespoons. Actually, you know what? This is a different mustard than I have used before. So I'm going to go with 2 tablespoons to start because I don't want it to be, you know, some mustard is really overpowering. And then my lemon juice, tablespoon of lemon juice. One of these flat whisks, a metal flat whisk, is great for this type of job because it'll scrape the bottom of your pan as well as mixing. So at this point I want to let this simmer for a minute and see how thick it gets. If I want it thicker, I'm going to make a little slurry with a little bit more arrowroot. Now there is, there's the arrowroot on the outside of my chicken, so that'll help it thicken up a little bit as well. It's just easier to mix that thickener in without all this other food in there. That's definitely enough of that mustard. I think I do want it a little bit thicker, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use broth instead of water. So my mixture is simmering. I mix my broth and my arrowroot. And that thickened up right away. Can you tell how thick this is? Okay, so I'm going to carefully slide my chicken back in and any accumulated juices, because that chicken isn't fully cooked at this point. So it needs to sit down in here and simmer. And then I want about a half a cup of cranberries. So because it doesn't really matter, I'm not really going to measure. I just poured what was about a half a cup in my hand and tossed those in. They're still simmering pretty hard. So let me turn that down. Let me switch to a clean spatula at this point, since those others I was using on raw chicken. We're just going to let that go for a little bit. Okay, so we're about to eat. So my husband is a little bit late getting home, and my sauce got a little thicker than I wanted it to be. So I just added a little extra broth. No big deal. I just want to be sure to taste it and make sure that it doesn't need additional seasoning. So if you have to do that, just taste it. So I'm going to add a green onion because it'll just offer a mild onion flavor and a pretty green color. You could use this simply as a garnish at the end if you want it. I'm going to save a little bit to garnish, but I actually want to put a little bit in my dish right now while we're about 5 minutes from eating, so that a little bit of that onion flavor will be imparted to my dish. And it turned completely off, so let me turn that back on. If you wanted to serve this over rice or cauliflower rice to kind of soak up all that sauce, that would be delicious. We have some roasted root veggies, so it'll be great with that as well. I'm going to give it a little taste at this point. I want to taste a little bit of chicken, a little bit of the sauce, to make sure it's seasoned just like I like. Okay, let's give this a taste. It's so good. So here's the tricky thing. when I tasted the sauce, and I've made this before, so I know, which is why I didn't say anything to you at the time, but when I tasted my sauce for seasoning and to see if that particular mustard was okay, if I needed more, the sauce was a little bit sharp, a little too sharp for my taste. But I knew by the time I put the chicken in, and the extra little bit of starch on the outside of the chicken, plus just the sort of the sweetness of the meat itself, the sweetness of the cranberries, would mix in and mellow that out, and it makes a very balanced dish. And it's delicious. It's perfect right now. So if you taste your sauce early on, which I encourage you to do, don't be discouraged. What you would really be tasting for at that point is there enough of a mustardy taste? Do I think I need to add more mustard? Or is it too salty? If it's too salty, then you're going to need to water that down a little bit, either with broth if your broth isn't salty, or you might actually have to add some water. If stuff gets a little spicy, which then maybe you have a really spicy mustard, you can add some sort of fat to mellow that out. So a little bit of coconut cream or regular cream, or even butter would be delicious if you're doing dairy. So tasting it early on is good and important, but just remember the flavor of your dish is going to change once you get all of your ingredients in there. So again, it's getting a little too thick because he's not home yet. So thank goodness I have my broth right here. So I'll probably have added about 1.5 cups of broth, which if you eat it right away, that's fine. But the longer it sits and simmers, it's fine. It's delicious. You just may have to thin out your sauce a little bit. Okay, so everybody's home. We can eat now. Let me just show you what all we're having. So we have some really yummy roasted veggies here. I have carrots, a little bit of white potato, some sweet potato, and parsnip. So we've been doing our one new veggie every week. And we've had parsnips before, but it had been a while. And there wasn't really anything particularly interesting at the store this week, so I went with a parsnip. But we had Swiss chard, which again, we had Swiss chard before, but it had been a while. Purple cauliflower, fennel. Yeah, I think those have all been our new veggies, so that's been fun. So we have our roasted veggies. I have some salad. Y'all, if you don't make your own salad dressings, I really recommend it. It's very easy. You can totally control the ingredients. The worst thing in commercial salad dressings is usually the oil. I either just like balsamic vinegar and olive oil. I like that a lot. Or I like a creamy dressing. And so for a creamy dressing, I make my homemade mayonnaise, which the recipe is on the website. There's probably 2 videos where I make that. So I have honey mustard here, which is simply mayonnaise, mustard, honey, and a little bit of onion powder. And then this is like a buffalo, so it is the mayonnaise and some Frank's red hot sauce, Frank's buffalo sauce. And that's delicious. So I have my roasted veggies, I have my salad, and then I have my chicken. So I'm going to have a couple of these tenderloins with the yummy cranberry sauce. I think I am hungry, so I'm going to have 3 pieces of chicken. And use my scissors to just snip a few little thin green onions right on top to be pretty. And of course, I like the flavor. So we'll add that right on. And there is our chicken with cranberry Dijon sauce, taken from a recipe that we could not eat anymore, with flour and sugar sweetened cranberries and wine, and made it perfectly acceptable for a paleo diet and even Whole30. So I hope you make this one and enjoy it. It's actually very fast if everybody gets home in time. It's like 20 minutes or less. Super fast, super delicious, and really flavorful. And I hope that you love it. You can find the recipe on my website at ourpaleofamily.com. Thanks, everybody.